On August 24, 1874, the first Seventh-day Adventist school was officially opened in Battle Creek, with 100 students enrolled. It was named Battle Creek College. Its purpose was to provide our young people an education based on biblical principles. The Bible was to be the primary textbook, and in its classrooms, future pastors and medical missionaries were to be trained. Several years before its opening, Ellen and James White had been instructed that a school needed to be established. The school was to be situated out of the city on acreage where students would have the opportunity to learn while doing manual labor, instead of being confined to a classroom all day. But from the start, God's plan was not followed. Those who were entrusted with establishing the new school chose instead to build the school in Battle Creek. It wasn't long before the school was embroiled in controversy. In 1881, Alexander McLearn was elected the second president. Being a recent convert to Adventism, he had no appreciation for our history or the spirit of prophecy, and consequently favored teaching the Greek and Latin classics. By 1904, Ellen White finally warned that no one should send their children to Battle Creek College anymore because of the influence Kellogg had on what was being taught there.
At the turn of the 20th century, Ellen White counseled parents not to send their children to Battle Creek College for their education because they would be corrupted. What about our schools today? Would she give the same counsel she gave back then? By the end of this episode, you will see that many of our schools are corrupting our children because they are no longer following the pattern God gave us. Due to the division at Battle Creek College on August 10, 1882, the college closed for a year. When it reopened in 1883, the newly elected president, Wilcott H. Littlejohn, attempted to follow the spirit of Prophecy Council more closely. That same year saw the opening of the church's second college, Healdsburg Academy in Healdsburg, Northern California. It was later renamed Pacific Union College. By 1891, Ellen White saw the need to warn our schools and teachers not to introduce textbooks written by pagans and infidels. On November 10, 1891, she wrote in the Review and Herald, "The light shining upon those who have eyes to see cannot be mingled with the darkness of heresy and error found in many of the textbooks recommended to the students in our colleges. Both teachers and pupils have thought that in order to obtain an education, it was necessary to study the productions of writers who teach infidelity, because their works contain some bright gems of thought. Why should we wade through the mass of error contained in the works of pagans and infidels for the sake of obtaining the benefit of a few intellectual truths, when all truth is at our command? No teacher in our schools should suggest the idea that, in order to have the right discipline, it is essential to study textbooks expressing pagan and infidel sentiments. Today you will find that this counsel is not being followed by our schools. According to Dennis Fortin, professor of historical theology at Andrews University, it is okay to read books that teach error. Notice what he said in a statement addressing the spiritual formation issue. We are diligent to select good academic books on this subject, and the choice of books we adopt for our classes does not mean we accept all of these authors' points of view. Yet we believe one goal of graduate education is to impart the skill of discernment, and we desire to teach our students to be deep thinkers and not mere reflectors of other people's thoughts. Are books like Richard Foster's Celebration of Discipline good academic books? Is it possible that students will be able to discern all the wrong they learn from books like this that do not support our message, or in some cases, even speak against it? In 1884, Ellen White counseled, "Suffer not yourselves to open the lids of a book that is questionable. There's a hellish fascination in the literature of Satan. It is the powerful battery by which he tears down a simple religious faith. Never feel that you are strong enough to read infidel books, for they contain a poison like that of asp. They can do you no good and will surely do you harm. In reading them, you are inhaling the miasmas of hell. They will be to your soul like a corrupt stream of water, defiling the mind, keeping it in the mazes of skepticism, and making it earthly and sensual." A number of years later, Ellen White further wrote in Review and Herald, "Should Christ enter our institutions for the education of the youth, he would cleanse them as he cleansed the temple, banishing many things that have a defiling influence. Many of the books which the youth study would be expelled, and their places would be filled with others that would inculcate substantial knowledge and abound in sentiments which might be treasured in the heart, in precepts that might govern the conduct. Is it the Lord's purpose that false principles, false reasoning, and the sophistries of Satan should be kept before the mind of our youth and children? Shall pagan and infidel sentiments be presented to our students as valuable additions to their store of knowledge?" So are books like Richard Foster's Celebration of Discipline good academic books for our students to be reading? And is Fortin's advice safe to follow? Can our students read the books that are required, that teach elements of spiritualism, evolution, and other questionable content, and not be influenced by them? Of course not. This is why Ellen White wrote, "A pure education for the youth in our schools, unmixed with heathen philosophy, is a positive necessity. We need to guard continually against those books which contain sophistry in regard to geology and other branches of science. Before the theories of men of science are presented to immature students, they need to be carefully sifted from every trace of infidel suggestions. One tiny seed of infidelity sown by a teacher in the heart of a student may spring up and bring forth a harvest of unbelief. The sophistries regarding God and nature that are flooding the world with skepticism are the inspiration of the fallen foe. Through science, Satan has sought to destroy or compromise the faith of many Seventh-day Adventists. No wonder so many of our teachers, students, and church members are confused regarding the creation of this world. What a shame that God's counsel has not been followed. How many tiny seeds are being placed in the minds of our children? Many would ask at this time, but what are we to use to teach our children? God has already given us counsel to meet this question. In a night vision given me some years ago, I was in an assembly where our school problems were being discussed, and the question was asked, why has not appropriate matter for reading books and other lesson books been selected and compiled? Why has not the Word of God been extolled above every human production? Our schools and churches should be carefully selecting and, if necessary, compiling textbooks that contain no trace of error. But sadly, that has not happened and probably never will, considering the amount of apostasy that exists in the church today. Are there any other areas where our schools are not following God's counsel? Unfortunately, there are plenty of problems. This includes the endorsement or allowing competitive sports, drama, worldly movies, comedy, and other unchristian practices. Today, many of our teachers know nothing about how our schools ought to be run. Take, for example, playing competitive sports. In our schools, it's common practice to encourage competitive sports. This has adverse effects on the developing mind. Instead of teaching our students to be self-denying, humble Christians, competitive sports teach the opposite. Ellen White gave an account of a situation that took place at Avondale College in Australia in 1900. It was the first anniversary of the college, so a holiday had been called. During the morning, a presentation was given in the chapel. According to Ellen White, after the meeting, the remainder of the day was spent by the students in various games and sports, some of which were frivolous, rude, and grotesque. During that night, she was given a dream of what took place that day. In describing it, she wrote, "I was shown that in the amusements carried on at the school that afternoon, the enemy gained a victory, and teachers were weighed in the balances and found wanting. I was greatly distressed and burdened to think that those standing in responsible positions should open the door, as it were, invite the enemy in, for this they did in permitting the exhibitions that took place. By what they permitted, they marred their record and grieved the Spirit of God. The students were encouraged, and of course the effects of which were not easily effaced. There is no end to the path of vain amusements, and every step taken in it is a step in a path which Christ has not traveled." According to God's counsel, when our schools allow these students to play meaningless sports and games, especially competitive ones, they are doing the work of Satan. Notice what some of these games were. A view of things was presented before me in which the students were playing games of tennis and cricket. Then I was given instruction regarding the character of these amusements. They were presented to me as a species of idolatry, like the idols of the nations. Both cricket and tennis are competitive sports that are idols to the world. Playing those sports back then at Avondale College allowed Satan to gain a victory and dishonored God. What does that say about allowing such competitive and world-loving sports into our schools? Is it any different today? No. The principle never changes. In fact, the world is probably more in love with sports today than it was back in the 1900s. Some will reason that in order to allow our students to experience physical exercise, our schools need to allow sports. This is faulty reasoning. Ellen White wrote, "The public feeling is that manual labor is degrading, yet men may exert themselves as much as they choose at cricket, baseball, or in a pugilistic contest without being regarded as degraded. Satan is delighted when he sees human beings using their physical and mental powers in that which does not educate, which is not useful, which does not help them to be a blessing to those who need their help. While the youth are becoming expert in games that are of no real value to themselves or to others, Satan is playing the game of life for their souls, taking from them the talents that God has given them and placing in their stead His own evil attributes. From the beginning, God had answered the physical exercise issue. He proposed that our students spend time each day in manual physical labor through activities such as gardening. This is why our schools were to be out in the country where a garden could be grown. Naturally, many will question, is it wrong to play all sports? The answer to that depends on the circumstances. In the Adventist home, Ellen White wrote, "While we restrain our children from worldly pleasures that have a tendency to corrupt and mislead, we ought to provide them innocent recreation, to lead them in pleasant paths where there is no danger. I do not condemn the simple exercise of playing ball, but this, even in its simplicity, may be overdone. I shrink always from the almost sure result which follows in the wake of these amusements. It leads to an outlay of means that should be expended in bringing the light of truth to souls that are perishing out of Christ. The amusements and expenditures of means for self-pleasing, which lead on step by step to self-glorifying, and the educating in these games for pleasure produce a love and passion for such things that is not favorable to the perfection of Christian character. Sports played in a way that does not lead to competition, self-glorification, pride, strife, or aggression are safe. But we need to remember that even the simplest sports can be overdone. It would be so much better to take children out into nature where they can receive exercise. This might include, for example, growing gardens or orchards, or going on nature walks. Another problem that has become entrenched in our schools is the teaching and acceptance of drama and comedy. In today's media-driven world, this is a very important point to consider. In Fundamentals of Christian Education, Ellen White wrote of the dangers of theatrical performances. I cannot find an instance in the life of Christ where he devoted time to play and amusement. He was a great educator for the present and the future life. I have not been able to find one instance where he educated his disciples to engage in amusement of football or pugilistic games, to obtain physical exercise, or in the theatrical performances, and yet Christ was our pattern in all things. Christ, the world's Redeemer, gave to every man his work and bids them, "Occupy till I come." In 1881, Ellen White wrote of the dangers of theatrical entertainments in Testimonies for the Church, Volume 4. Although this related to sanitariums, the principle she gave applies equally to our schools and churches today. Worldly or theatrical entertainments are not essential for the prosperity of the sanitarium or for the health of the patients. As soon as these entertainments are introduced, the objections to theater going are removed from many minds, and the plea that moral and high-toned scenes are to be acted at the theater breaks down the last barrier. Many today want to excuse this counsel and think that drama in our schools and churches are innocent and nothing like the theatrical performances of the 19th century. That may be the case, but who knows where it will lead young developing minds? In the Review and Herald, Ellen White wrote, "Many literary societies are in reality young theaters on a cheap scale, and they create in the youth a taste for the stage." Ellen White went on to describe the sad account of a young lady who refused to give her life to Christ because of her love for the theater and desire to become an actress. She knew she could not indulge in those things and be a Christian at the same time. What a shame our schools no longer realize this. When asked where she acquired a taste for the theater, the young woman replied she gained it when she was only 4 years old, when she was made to participate in innocent dramas in Sunday school. We need to stop fooling ourselves. We wonder why our children turn from the truth when they are older. One of the reasons is because they have learned when young to love the world, and this has drawn them away from Christ. The English poet and playwright William Shakespeare is widely regarded as the greatest writer of the English language and the world's preeminent dramatist. He is famous for plays like Hamlet and Romeo and Juliet. The world may love Shakespeare, but Ellen White had nothing good to say about the man. When the Signs of the Times dedicated an article to him on the first page, she was horrified and ashamed. In Manuscript Releases, Volume 19, she recounts how she was robbed of her sleep and thrown into an agony of distress. Notice the rebuke she gave back then regarding this situation. It applies even more so today. Brethren, let us come to our senses. In more ways than one, are we departing from God? If our brethren have not discernment enough to see the evil of these things, when will they have? Why can they not understand the tenor of such things? It pains me to find that our schools see no problem promoting Shakespeare by performing his plays. They are even bold enough to advertise it on their websites. On the Walla Walla University website, it listed past shows of Walla Walla University drama. The list reveals that the university has been performing these drama productions since 1961. Notice that many Shakespeare plays appear on this list, such as Othello, The Taming of the Shrew, A Midsummer's Night Dream, Romeo and Juliet, and Hamlet. They even performed C.S. Lewis' The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, a play that promotes magic, mythical creatures, and fairy tales. According to this website, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe by C.S. Lewis presents a Christian worldview through a mythic tale. It takes place in Narnia, a world of magic. In Narnia, virtually every fairy tale or mythic creature imaginable comes alive. All in all, The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe presents the gospel in a powerful way that children can relate to and adults can still learn from. Are fairy tales really innocent? Do they become acceptable if they promote Christian themes? Is it possible that fairy tales can affect the minds of children and adults? In Testimonies for the Church, Volume 8, Ellen White answers these questions. In the education of children and youth, fairy tales, myths, and fictitious stories are now given a large place. Books of this character are used in the schools, and they are to be found in many homes. How can Christian parents permit their children to use books so filled with falsehood? When the children ask the meaning of stories so contrary to the teaching of their parents, the answer is that the stories are not true. But this does not do away with the evil results of their use. The ideas presented in these books mislead the children. They impart false views of life and beget and foster a desire for the unreal. The widespread use of such books at this time is one of the cunning devices of Satan. Never should books containing a perversion of truth be placed before children or youth. And if those with mature minds had nothing to do with such books, they would be far safer. Now ask yourself the question, if fairy tales, myths, and fictitious stories were one of Satan's most cunning devices back then, how much more dangerous is television today with so many movies and TV shows that promote a perversion of truth or outright error? We could ask the same question about the internet and computer games. Walla Walla isn't the only school neglecting God's counsel in regard to drama. Pacific Union College has its Dramatic Arts Society, where students are being indoctrinated into the world. According to their website, the Dramatic Arts Society, or DAS, is an organization that produces quality theater experiences for the Pacific Union College community. The society collaborates on comedies, tragedies, musicals, and original works. They boast of works such as My Alice, which explored the story behind the story of Alice in Wonderland, and Shakespeare's Twelfth Night. Under their new story is a link to Kimberly Week's article entitled Students Experience Shakespeare in Iceland, which reviews the PUC students' trip to the Oregon Shakespeare Festival in Iceland, Oregon. So what did the students think of the event? While the class is required for students who are majoring in English education or minoring in drama, many of the students who did not need the college credit came for the sheer pleasure of watching Shakespeare on stage. Now, what does attending such an event do for students? According to Cynthia Westerbeck, the English professor and tour coordinator at PUC, seeing Shakespeare on stage helps students to appreciate the theater experience. The culture of the festival is simply an immersion in a world of live theater, giving students an opportunity to see both the hard work that goes into producing live theater and also experience the magic that happens when all that work turns into a polished performance. And the students agreed. According to one of the students, by the end of seeing that much Shakespeare, you're more comfortable with it, the characters, the language, and you can appreciate it more. Ellen White knew what she was saying when she condemned theatrical performances, Shakespeare, and other corrupt playwrights. She knew that once our youth get a taste for it, they will feel more comfortable with the world. How many of our students over the years left the church because they were given a taste for the world? Another problem with drama is that it often ends in frivolity. Notice what Ellen White wrote about literary societies. Those who compose these societies, who profess to love and reverence sacred things, and yet allow the mind to come down to the superficial, to the unreal, to simple, cheap, fictitious acting, are doing the devil's work just as surely as they look upon and unite in these scenes. Could their eyes be opened, they would see that Satan was their leader, the instigator, through agents present who think themselves to be something, but God pronounces their life and character altogether lighter than vanity. Notice Satan is the one leading those who perform superficial, cheap, and fictitious acting. Notice now how this is being carried out in our schools.
I must. This house appalls me, and everyone in it. No one will pay attention to me for a single minute. I offer good advice, yet she won't hear it. Children, I take my leave, much vexed in spirit. And you, girl, you talk too much, and I'm afraid you're far too saucy for a lady's maid. You push it everywhere and have your say.
Read? Sorry, brother.
Read!
Sorry. Put my mind at rest. I always learn the household is a long time to. As long as all these past few days I've been gone, how are the family? What's been going on?
2 days ago, your wife had a bad fever and a fierce headache and refused to leave her.
Oh.
You sat beside her bed till morning came.
Oh.
Well, having eaten, he rose and sought his room all ready to doze.
This first video was filmed at Southwestern Adventist University. It was a drama production of Tartuffe, one of the most famous theatrical comedies by Molière. It tells the story of a hypocrite who attempts to destroy the domestic happiness of a citizen who is charmed by his seeming piety. The play includes theft and lust. The next video is of a musical production performed by the Hong Kong Adventist Academy entitled Into the Woods. Notice how the dean and the Bible teacher describe the production.
Hi, my name is Tommy Poole. I'm the dean as well as the Bible teacher here at HKAA, and I've been assistant directing for the upcoming musical Into the Woods. And this musical, it has everything you could want. It has comedy, it has drama, it's a great commentary on life. And I'm really excited to see how it all comes together here in a couple of weeks. So you should definitely come check it out, Into the Woods.
Comedy is not something a Christian should be involved in, yet our schools promote it through their drama classes. This is not in accordance with counsel from the Spirit of prophecy. In the book, That I May Know Him, we read, "While we are not to be gloomy, but cheerful and happy, there is to be no silliness, but a sobriety and harmony with our faith. Words and actions form character. Therefore, our words should be clean, pure, simple, yet elevated. The gift of speech is a valuable talent, and the Lord has no pleasure in hearing low, cheap, degrading nonsense which tastes strongly of vice and revelry. These evil, silly words are discordant notes and contribute to the happiness of no one. They are a detriment to the spirituality. The Word of God forbids them." There is much more counsel regarding this in the Spirit of Prophecy. In Manuscript Releases, Volume 18, we are told, "It is right to be cheerful and joyful, but words of jesting and joking, of lightness and trifling, show that the profession of Christianity is not genuine." Another problem with drama is that it encourages self-glorification of the actors. Just look at the movie stars. This is where it leads. Notice the advertisement for Hong Kong Adventist Academy, Into the Woods.
Hello, my name is Eddie Lam, I'm staff at HKAC. I'm going to be acting as a baker in this Into the Woods musical. Come watch me.
Hello, I am Jen. I am from the 4th grade. I am 9 years old. I study at HKAA. Come watch me.
Hey, I'm Sam. I'm a student at HKAC. I'm going to be playing the role of Cinderella, and you should come and watch me.
Hi, I'm Paul, and I'm in the ECF class. I'm the narrator to play, so come watch me talk.
Hello, I'm Marlene, and I study in Commonwealth Baptist College in ECF, English College Foundation, and I play as Little Red Riding Hood in Into the Woods, so please watch me.
Hello, I'm Stella, and now I'm Rapunzel. I'm a college student, so come and watch me.
Hi, I'm Enzo.
Hey, I'm Charles.
We're both from college, psychology department.
Notice how it is all about come and see me. The world is addicted to drama, and sadly, the church is too. But this is not only done in our schools, but also in our church services where God is supposed to be the center of our worship. Just when we thought it couldn't get any worse, we find that it has indeed gotten worse. In Message to Young People, Ellen White gave counsel that, if followed, would protect our youth from demoralizing amusements. Let the mind grasp the stupendous truths of Revelation. It will never be content to employ its powers upon frivolous themes. It will turn with disgust from the trashy literature and idle amusements that are demoralizing the youth of today. Because this counsel has not been followed, our youth are being demoralized by a variety of activities. Notice one of the performances for the Avondale College Talent Night in 2008 called Spice Girls. If men dressed up in women's clothes dancing to a worldly song is not demoralizing, I don't know what is. Obviously, the faculty were not outraged because the college has held several other talent nights since. Notice this one that took place in 2011. Who in their right mind would send their children to a college that lets their students participate in such abominations? Avondale College was founded by direction received through Ellen White. Today it might belong to the Adventist Church, but God is not glorified by it. There's another abomination that has recently taken place at our schools. Early in 2013, the craze called Harlem Shake took YouTube by storm. It's when a group of people perform a comedy sketch accompanied by a short excerpt from Bauer's dance music, Harlem Shake. It went viral around February of 2013 with tens of thousands of Harlem Shake videos uploaded to YouTube at that time. The videos usually last about 30 seconds. It begins with one person who often wears a helmet or mask and dances to the song alone for 15 seconds, surrounded by other people not paying attention or seemingly unaware of the dancing individual. When the music changes, the video cuts to the entire crowd doing a crazy, convulsive dance for the rest of the video. The first video comes to us from Oakwood University.
Con los terroristas. And do the Harlem Shake.
Oakwood's rendition of the Harlem Shake may surprise many Adventists, but it is quite tame compared to others. This next video comes from Southwestern University. Notice that this fellow from Southwestern University is riding what appears to be a female student on her hands and knees. Also notice how frivolous and stupid they look as they dance around. Students from Walla Walla decided they too wanted to get in on the act. Look at how many of them there are.
Con los terroristas. Harlem Shake.
Are these really Seventh-day Adventists? Andrews University is where many of our pastors are trained. Surely they wouldn't be involved with this craze. Well, look again.
Con los terroristas.
Just look at how this student from Andrews University performs for the camera. Now look at our future pastors. Do you really want to send your children to this university? We have saved the worst till last. This next video was filmed at Pacific Union College.
Con los terroristas.
The moves that this fellow makes are very sexual, but look at what happens next. It's beyond description. Is this really happening in an Adventist college? Of course, the staff of these universities were quick to distance themselves from such abominations, but sadly the damage has been done. Satan gained another victory when the world was able to see just what happens at our universities. How can these institutions be educating people to get ready for heaven when they are not following the counsels given to us from God? If the students of our schools were taught according to God's blueprint, none of this would be happening. Instead, our youth would be trained in a way which would draw them closer to Christ. And maybe then we wouldn't be losing them to the world. Isabel, I don't know about you, but what I found out about the Adventist education system is really bad. It's enough to make me sick.
Ernie, I found the same with the Adventist health system. Our hospitals are nothing like the sanitariums Ellen White was shown that we should run. They've united with the world and are pushing worldly ideas, including New Age practices.
That's so sad. I guess this is part of the overall apostasy that has been increasing over the years.
Oh yes, we're in a time when we need to be sighing and crying for all these abominations.
You know, Isabel, there are many other areas that we just don't have time to cover that we need to be sighing crying for.
Such as?
Well, as the apostasy has increased, our standards in the church have dropped considerably. We used to teach it. Dancing was not appropriate, but now many schools allow it. We used to know what type of music was appropriate to listen to, but now anything goes. There used to be a time when our women followed dress reform, but now they wear skimpy, sexually provocative clothes that are just like the world. We used to teach that wearing jewelry and makeup was not appropriate, but now it's common for Adventists to wear jewelry. We used to teach health reform, but now the majority of Adventists don't follow health reform anymore. And even the divorce rate within the church is no different to the divorce rate in the world. You know, Isabel, when you view the church as a whole, no wonder Ellen White described it as appearing to fall. Take, for example, the 2011 convocation at Southern Adventist University. When I saw the video, I wondered whether it could get any worse. I want to show you this video I'm talking about. Okay, here you go. Notice how the students are acting like the world, dancing with a bedlam of noise. Who would want to send their children to that school to receive their education when things like this take place? But you know, Isabel, as bad as this is, I want you to notice that the president comes into the auditorium as if in a grand procession with his hair spiked and dyed bright blue. Then at the end, he mentions the camera being close and makes this horrible facial expression.
Oh my, I just don't know what to say. Clearly, Satan is corrupting our youth, who not only are our future leaders, but he's already corrupted those in responsible positions who are supposedly teaching our youth.
Yes, he is. And this is why we're presenting this series. You know, Jesus has shown me that he is about to return. He is looking to see whether his people are living by faith, but sadly, they are not. This is why he has given me dreams to warn people, but soon it's going to be too late to change.
Well, Ernie, it is my prayer, and I know it is yours too, that people will watch the videos in this series, read your dreams, realize their true condition, and repent before their probation closes.
Yes, that is my prayer too.
In our next episode,
the Laodicean message presents Jesus as a patient and loving Savior.
Alarmed by what he read, Josiah sought word from Huldah, the prophetess. Could the judgments of God be averted?
For many years, Jesus has been weighing his people.
The story of Elijah is one of those great events that will be repeated in these last days.
One has to wonder what kind of discernment the General Conference has when they approved funding of nearly $1 million to produce The Record Keeper.
The name of the book was changed to The Great Hope. The message for us is plain. Not until the church is completely cleansed from all its apostasy, Ezekiel 9 reveals how God will accomplish this. The church will go through, but it won't be the church as we know it today. It will be a considerably smaller, purified church.